Welcome to the Empowered Woman Show, episode number 18.
Welcome to the Empowered Women Show, inspiring women with small voices but big dreams to step up and fulfill their extraordinary potential. And now your host, Casey Lightbody.
Hello and welcome to another episode of the Empowered Woman Show. I'm your host, Casey Lightbody, and I couldn't be more thrilled with the guest that we have on today. Jennifer LOUDEN is a personal growth pioneer who helped launch the self-care movement with her first book, The Woman's Comfort Book. Since then, she's gone on to create and write 7 additional books all around whole living and well-being. She leads retreats and workshops and has been doing since 1992. And she's also been creating vibrant online communities and innovative learning experiences since 2000. She's got a wealth of wisdom and knowledge to share with us, and I can't wait to dive in today. I'm absolutely thrilled with our guest today on the Empowered Woman Show. Jen LOUDEN, welcome.
Hi, across the world.
Right across in Brisbane, Australia, where it's looking actually very grey and miserable. Usually it's nice and sunny in this part of the world.
It's sunny. I'm in the Pacific Northwest on Bainbridge Island, Washington, and it's sunny. We're having spring weather where we get a downpour, and then the sun comes out. So I just went for a walk, and it smelled so good.
Oh, that's gorgeous. Oh, I love that smell of fresh rain on a spring day. I can actually just picture it right now, and it's like, oh, that's just gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. Jen, I can't wait to dive in and share your story. As we mentioned offline, I've recently come across your work, and it just speaks to me in volumes as a quiet, shy, introverted woman who's on my own journey from stepping off the sidelines of success into the spotlight with such a powerful calling and feeling that I've got a message to share. Honestly, your work has been a breath of fresh air, and I'm just so thrilled to have you on the show. So first of all, I'd love to kind of dive in and go way back, actually. You are an author of 6 amazing books, and you are a pioneer of personal growth and recognized as an expert in self-care and really helped the whole self-care movement with your first book. Jen, I'd love to kind of understand how you got involved in and how you recognized that self-care really was your passion and what led you to this path.
Well, I certainly didn't recognize that it was my passion. I went to film school in the early 80s, and I wanted to be a filmmaker, and I wanted to be a screenwriter, and I wanted to be an editor, and I wanted to be a director. And I got out of film school, and I started writing screenplays, and really hit it after a few years, really hit a wall and really fell into a very dark place. And my life conspired at that time to really get me. Of course, I didn't think this at the time.
Yes, I was going to wonder that.
Everybody, in case you're in this place right now, conspired to get me to listen and to listen to that still small voice inside. So I had a skiing accident. I was non-weight bearing on crutches for 3 months. I lived up 42 stairs. My boyfriend and I broke up, but only right after his roommate wrecked my car, and it was in the shop for 3 months. My dog bit me. But the worst thing is that I was unable to write. I was unable to write the screenplay that I was working on. And I just would sit there. I would roll around my little apartment in my desk chair, because it was like a wheelchair for me. And I would rewrite the same couple of pages over and over again. But during this time, and I know you all can relate, I would hear impulses arising from inside of ways to take care of myself. And that impulse was to quit writing. And that still small voice would say, just take some time off. Go work in a bookstore for a while, go work in a garden store. I loved gardening. And I would say, yeah. When I finish this and I sell it for $300,000, because I had a friend sell a screenplay for a lot of money. So I'm like, that number was in my head. And this life just got tighter and tighter. And finally one day I was really surrendered. I really surrendered. I don't think we can plan surrender, right?
That's right. Yeah.
So I tell this story with so much care because, it sounds like a prescription. Okay, things get really bad and then we surrender. But I don't know that I've surrendered much in my life. It was one of the few times. And by surrender, I really mean I can't do this anymore. And I don't have any idea what to do. But I needed to share that with someone. And in a perverse way, I'm sure, I called a friend I was very jealous of, whose writing career was going quite a bit better than mine at the time. And I told her, I'm going to quit writing for a while. I think I said a month. And she was, like, okay, whatever. But when I hung up the phone, I heard the title for my first book as clearly, Casey, as if you said it to me right now, which was the Woman's Comfort Book. And I didn't read self-help books. I had never thought about writing self-help books. Guys, this is in the 80s. This is before the
exactly.
internet. A whole different world, right? There was self-help books that long ago. But, and that began the journey, right? Of what is, I think of it now, 23 years later, that my psyche was really offering me a way to both be creative because it's so crucial. I was a father's daughter. I was very ambitious. It was offering me a way to do that through work, but it was also offering me a way to figure out what I needed to do to learn to be kind to myself, because that certainly wasn't available to me.
Yeah, that's incredible, Jen. And just going back to that moment, like you said, we can't plan those moments of surrender, but it's really, was it a feeling that you've actually, what was that feeling like at that moment? I just want to really try and identify what was that feeling that you knew that this was the time to surrender and really take on board what you were actually hearing internally.
So I wish I could go back in time and feel into it again. It was a long time ago. And I certainly recognized it as important at the time, but not as important as it's become. But the feeling that I remember, for whatever it's worth, is that I had no other choice. And a feeling, I was standing at a kitchen bar in my little one-bedroom apartment, my tiny, tiny apartment. And I remember putting down the phone and a feeling, kind of a whoosh.
Okay.
And I noted the title and I thought, well, that's interesting. But it wasn't like, the clouds parted and the angels came down. It took me 2 years.
Oh, wow. Okay.
2 years to honor that, explore it, and write the proposal. 2 years. I kept going back to the way, and this is what happens to us, right?
I was going to say, yeah. Interesting.
Oh, let's try that.
Yeah.
Wait, sure.
That's right. And so really, that's a really important point that you raised straight up there, Jen, is that it did take you 2 years, and it's really easy to go back to what you know rather than to trust where you're being pulled, I guess, as well. So it's that kind of yin yang of being pulled, but really knowing what your focus was. So you've been and had an amazing career and launched these 6 amazing books all around the topic of self-care and focus. And you've got the life book as well. And so really, in terms of now your career, Jen, and being an entrepreneur, what has that really, looking back on it, and I actually know, having listened to a couple of other interviews, that you come from an entrepreneurial family. Your dad was an entrepreneur, and, you have been an entrepreneur for much of your career. So looking back on the last 25 years, Jen, what has that really meant for you now? What is being an entrepreneur and being able to honor being creative and being able to share your voice really meant for you?
Well, I might have told the story in another interview, but I wasn't aware of how being an entrepreneur was so natural for me until my daughter was applying for college. She's now a junior in college. And my husband said, well, that's okay, something, because you'll go to graduate school. And I whipped my head around and I went like, why would she go to graduate school? But for him, PhD, it's like, oh yeah, that's what you do. That's what a professional does. You go to graduate school and you keep going. And I never even thought about it. I was just like, you do. So for me, it's so natural to think creative for yourself. It's so natural to my personality type. Okay. You may be surprised. I am an introvert. Mm-hmm. And I think part of why being an entrepreneur really worked for me was because I could be alone a lot. Yeah. Because the few straight jobs that I've had in my life, regular jobs in a regular place, it was really difficult to be with people like that all day. Mm-hmm. Of course, being alone has its own weirdnesses too.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I just want to say that because it's sometimes hard for me to see it because it's like the nose on my face.
Yeah.
And I think it's also been one of my greatest spiritual teachers to be entrepreneurial.
That's a huge one. So I think a lot of entrepreneurs listening, Jen, will actually, they've got this vision as, or maybe a calling like you had, is ready to be able to honor this thing that you want to get out of you. And so you launch your business, but I don't think many people realize the inner work really that needs to go with the entrepreneurial journey. I think this is a huge, huge piece that's often missed, actually. And I think this is a really, really interesting point that you raise, is it's the spiritual growth that comes with being an entrepreneur and the journey that it takes you on. And so, Jen, in terms of your spiritual growth and your learnings around that, what have been your biggest what has been your, and I know that we have many, many ups and downs, but what's been...
Let's just pick one.
Yes, exactly. Let's just pick one. Maybe one of your challenges that you've experienced.
Because I had early success, my most popular book was the Woman's Comfort book. So I then thought that would continue to happen. But in that model, I did a lot to promote that book. I was very entrepreneurial about it. But the story was I got picked.
Okay.
I was chosen. So it took me so long. I can't even tell you, only until a few years ago to realize I pick me. I choose. And so much of my career I was always published by big publishers. Oops, we forgot to turn the phone off.
Yeah, no problem.
Because it will ring and ring again, because my mom has Alzheimer's, and now she knows that I'm coming to get her later, but she's forgotten what time, so she'll just keep calling.
That's awesome. That's gorgeous.
And then I also did a lot of speaking and spokesperson work, where a brand would pay me to come and talk about self-care or talk about the pregnancy book I wrote or the other books that I've written on behalf of the brand. So you're not endorsing it. So all of that came with, like, the phone would ring, speaking of the phone. And I'd be like, oh, so that orientation is actually not an entrepreneurial orientation. So I think there was a lot of friction between the two.
Yeah.
I had to choose me. And in fact, I was in New York doing some work and visiting a friend afterwards, I don't know, sometime last year. And we were talking about some very similar career paths in writing and speaking. And I got really fierce with her. And I said, I don't wait for anybody anymore to choose me. I put on my own events. I run my own online courses, and you can hear it in my voice.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. It's incredibly powerful. So how did you come to that realization? Jen, you said it took such a long time, and I've actually just uncovered something huge for myself that's taken 25 years of feeling trapped, and eventually only just yesterday I was like, oh my God, this is it, and it just gives me goosebumps thinking about it, and it's just like, okay, now I go into entrepreneurial mode and it's like, okay, how do I sort this out now? Well,
actually, I'm just going to pause right there and be all coachy on you for a second. But we really, when we have those epiphanies and we are in the business of maybe sharing them on our blogs or our podcasts, or we're in the business of, like being our brand, we have to be really careful that we give our soul time to integrate and own it, and we keep it for ourselves and we let it ripen before we share it. I'm not suggesting you're not doing that, but I did that a lot. That was another mistake I made. I trotted out. It wasn't that it hurt anybody else. It just hurt me. It's like there's a way that you have to hold that close and be like, oh yeah, and take care of yourself and integrate it and really own it. And then it gets a richness and it gets a vibrancy that's then can live apart from you, if that makes any sense.
That it does. That's incredible advice too, Jen. I absolutely love that, and I'm fully taking that on board, because I think that whole idea, and we mentioned a little bit offline, is that you've actually just launched this amazingly vulnerable video that you're working on some incredibly emotional and hard stuff for you. And it's just like you shared some fantastic advice, and I'll definitely be sharing that link to that video on the show notes, because it really is that whole idea of taking care and creating these containers around that, which I love that advice that you shared, Jen, about that. It was incredible. So going back then, yes, we've definitely got these challenges. And so going back, so in terms of, the questions and the kind of investigation that you did around that, around making your own choices, have you got just one tip that you can share with our listeners around that?
Well, we all have signature patterns that are going to visit us our whole lives. That's the way we're built as humans. And so to have a lot of compassion for those patterns and not think that they're going to get solved, but to see them, to bring as much awareness to them as we can, and maybe awareness in the company of others. So I've been part of a mastermind group. We call ourselves a brain trust for 9 or 10 years. And so they see my patterns come around again. I see my patterns come around again while I'm talking to them. And I'm like, oh shit, I'm doing it again. Right? I also have 2 really lovely VAs, assistants, and they help me see my patterns. They help me see, and some of those patterns are taking on too much, over providing for my students for not enough money, saying yes to things that I shouldn't say yes to because maybe they're great things, but I don't have enough time for them. Overcomplicating, overgiving, overproviding. There you can see it's kind of a little rat's nest.
The rat's nest, right? Of all the kind of things that keep coming around, right? Yeah.
So the more attention I've given it, every year we've noticed that just some of it falling away. And I just canceled. I had next April was going to do a retreat that I've done twice before with 2 other gals called Creative Joy. It was an incredibly powerful retreat, but it just wasn't feeling right. It's too much logistics.
Okay. Yeah.
And I don't like logistics. I don't like details. I don't like being the one that's roping everybody in and saying, you do this and you do that. I can do it. Well, that doesn't mean I want to do it.
Exactly,
So
exactly.
I cried and cried when I sent the email and said, I'm backing out. And they were actually relieved and happy because they were feeling the same way. I still haven't told the alums that we're not doing it again because they're going to be really bummed.
Yeah. But, there's, again, 2 such important pieces that you raised there, Jen. One is what I call a cheerleading squad. So people that really get to know you, know your patterns so that they can really point them out to you. That's been absolutely huge in my journey too, is having this cheerleading squad that you can really rely on. Because oftentimes it's something that's so internal to you that it's really hard for you to actually self-identify, right?
It's mostly impossible.
Yeah.
It's not the way the human brain is wired. The human brain is not wired to see itself very well. It takes a lot of practice.
A lot of practice. And yes, and being really honest with yourself, because oftentimes you don't want to see those things too, right?
No, and which is really huge because a cheerleading squad, while I love the idea of that, it does kind of give you, it's more like a lovingly bust your butt squad.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Cheerleading squad, like, go, go, go. And it's like, well, no, don't go that way. Don't go that way anymore.
Yeah, that's right.
And then you also touched on something that's been a huge lesson for me, going back to the beginning of the conversation, which is none of these patterns will be transformed if we meet them with self-hatred or judgment. Period.
Okay.
End of story. Or if we reject them, the pattern itself, or we say, oh no, I'm going to get rid of you.
Yeah.
Anything that we're in that adversarial relationship with cannot transform. But everything that we welcome it. We say, oh, look, I'm doing it again. Oh my gosh, I'm making this so much more complicated. I was just adding so many bells and whistles. I'm so adorable.
I love it.
Too late. I already advertised and people already signed up. I'm screwed, but I'm so adorable. The other thing that really helped me transform this is having what decision theorists call tripwires. So one of my tripwires is I could not say yes to any partnerships without telling the brain trust and telling my husband.
Right. Brilliant.
So,
love it.
Because I'd be like, I want to do that.
Yeah, that's a really good piece of advice too. Because I was going to say around the whole saying yes thing is really, again, that you raised, around the retreat that you've just said no to, is really getting clear on what you want to do, which comes back to your whole tagline, Jen is living and creating and with no holding back, and I think that's really, really key, is really figuring out what's fun for you. What do you really enjoy doing? It's not what's easy for you. It's really like you are in charge of designing a life that you, and only you are. It's all about you and your choices. You really are in control, right?
Yeah, I do believe that, but I really struggle with it. I really struggle with it. I think you have worked with Tara Gentile.
Yes.
And she has a new book out, Quiet Power
Strategy,
and I just read it on the plane coming back from Mexico.
Interesting.
Yeah,
I'll give her a little plug. Look.
I'm reading it on the plane. I'm like, hey, Bob, look. It's cute. I didn't know that. And I really like what to say about getting clear on what you said, what you really want to do. But then you have to look for that place, if you're in business, of what do people want? What do people, sweet spot where they come together? But there is a way that I've really struggled with that. I really struggled with it. And I just came back from a walk, as I said earlier, and I was really thinking a lot about what Tara says in the book and what this next stage of my career is going to look like to embrace that. So that's completely unhelpful, everybody. But
yeah. So and why do you, just touching on that, Janice? Why do you know that you struggle with that? What piece of it?
Why do I know? Because I'll be like, oh,
okay.
God, why am I doing this? Oh, I am not having fun.
Okay, awesome.
And I think that when I'm in the funner place, it's more like, all right, this is good. This is hard. It's hard to concentrate. I really want to click away on Facebook, but yeah, I'm going, right?
Okay, got it. Yeah.
Good. This is good. There's more moments of flow and satisfaction. And a lot of times I shouldn't say a lot of times, but there are times that it doesn't feel that way. Mostly around marketing. Which I'm good at it, but I'm not enjoying it yet.
Okay, interesting.
So I don't know. I'm just in a big question about this, just to be very honest.
Well, and that's another thing that I love is this whole vulnerability, Jen, is and you really, really got to dig deep certainly from a personal point of view, is digging really deep to find the courage to be vulnerable. And I'd love to just touch on that a little bit with you, Jen, because all the work that I've read of yours is you really are just so amazing at sharing your vulnerability and speaking from your truth. And, it must take tremendous courage. And I just want to ask you, what role does vulnerability really play in your life and your business?
This is a completely unhelpful answer that I'm about to give you. I am built that if I'm not honest, and I don't mean honest, oh, I really hate those pants on you.
Yeah.
I mean honest, was this true for me? I can't do it.
Okay.
So it's there's some internal.
So you can't do what? You can't not be honest.
I can't. So I can't, if I have to sit down and write a blog post about a topic that you gave me and I'm not interested in it and I can't find something that's true about it, I can't do it. I've always hated writing on assignment and haven't done that much of it. I can't, every time that I do, when I would do the big fancy speeches, a lot of times I would get off the stage and go, God, that just felt so not that what I said wasn't true, but there's something, it's just I think it's my dharma. I think it's my calling is to keep sifting through my life with awareness and kindness and trying to bring it out in a way that's useful. So it's again, it's the entrepreneur thing. It's hard for me. That's why I don't teach business, for example, because I'm I don't know how I do this. I don't know why it's not scary for me. I don't know why. I mean, part of it is age too. You've done it for enough years. You're well, I guess I'm going to make enough money again this year.
Yeah, for sure.
So, but I think for me to try to bring something out about that that might be useful is that noticing where thinking you need to be other than you are is draining you.
Mm.
Not trying to change it, but just noticing it. Like, this comes up a lot with writers that I work with. I'm starting to work pretty exclusively with writers and content creators. And it really comes up, but I have to have this professional voice, or I have to make it worthwhile for people, or I have to provide a solution. And then you start to feel, if that starts to feel strained, or that you're pretending or you're working at it, I get really curious. What's underneath that feels more true for you? What's underneath that feels more, it makes my heart beat fast, but boy, I really want to tell that story.
Yeah, that's really interesting. And it's interesting that you draw that comparison around, writers wanting to produce something that's really, I forget the words that you use, but that it's aligned with customers. So, where we talk about with Tara, where you've got to give what people want versus what you want to create. And it's kind of finding that balance, but without that resistance. But without that resistance of feeling like you've got to create something because that's really what they need. Right.
Oh, I could never do that. Some people can do that. Some people can go. I was at a yoga vacation with my husband last week, and we met this young man, he's 32, but he's a good boy to me. Anyway, I just fell in love with him. He's adorable. And I will not name the person, but very famous internet person was a good friend of his. And he would split test his personality in his emails to see what aspects of his personality people wanted so he could show up that way. So that makes me want to throw up in my mouth a little bit. That's the extreme of what we're talking about. But there are people who can go out and go, wow, I'm going to create something about golf because I see that there's nobody doing this about golf in this target market, and get really excited about that. I would have to go work at Starbucks instead.
Me too.
And I'm not saying bad.
No, exactly.
I think I'm envious of those people.
That's right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Like, I had a friend who had a friend years ago, and he made a lot of money online selling tongue oil, TUNG, for your teak furniture. And he used Google AdWords, and he had it all wired. I'm like, how great is that? How practical, and it's much easier than doing whatever I do, which I don't even know what it is.
I love it. Well, actually, that leads me on to a fantastic, my next question is, how do you know, and you might laugh at this, is how do you know that you were born to do what you're doing now, Jen? It's funny that you say you don't really know what you do, because just your words just speak volumes to me, and it's just so helpful to so many people. So it's interesting that you say that, but how do you know personally that you really are doing what you were born to do?
That's a really great question. I really wish I had a great answer. The feeling that I've been in the last few months, I had a pretty strong spiritual. I went on a silent retreat with a teacher in, I think it was February, and it was very profound, and that has really deepened for me. And then I had a really great retreat with my mastermind people. I did a training with that teacher. I did some great therapy with my husband. A lot of good stuff happened in the spring or late winter, now spring. And it all is turned up the soil of this question. And the feeling that I'm getting is I'm actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing, terrible word, right?
I know what you mean.
A dharma, but I have been putting stuff on top of it so that I can't glory in it.
Okay.
So what I would say to make that useful is I wonder if we're always doing what we're called to do, but we're not noticing it. We're burying it under our judgments, and then that's what gets us stuck, so it can't keep moving.
Oh, I love that, Jen. I love that. And that is, I think that's a great, great question to consider, because it's interesting because that's something that I've experienced too, is that there's this, it's almost these layers that I feel, that you kind of, like, I know deep down in my heart that this is really what I want to do, but it's then kind of figuring out that whole path, if you like, too.
Yes, the form. And this is what I think I understand from spiritual study, is that the essence is the key to be in relationship with and expressing that essence. But the form that it takes is often what we get caught on. And rightfully so, right? We want to make money. We want to pay our mortgage. We want to send the kids to college. This is the world we live in, and it's crazy expensive. And I know Australia, I just learned, is like one of the most expensive countries now. I had no idea. I've only been there once in the early 80s, and it was like dirt cheap. And we were like, hey, have another bottle of wine.
I just love my wine.
Have that lobster for dinner, no problem.
Exactly.
So I just wonder about how we can keep the form in mind so that we're taking care of ourselves, but not attach that to that sense of our calling. Not get them mixed up.
Yeah.
That, I think, for me at least, wanting to be like certain success or certain amount of books sold or certain, Oprah calling again or something like that. I've gotten that screwed up, I think, with just the enjoyment of really being a good teacher and writer.
I love that. And I think, and interestingly, I've noticed that, and again, we talk about, I've read lots of your work, and you've recently you've revamped your website and got like this clarified vision around this tagline, which, oh my goodness, this speaks to me so much, But, Jen, I'd love to kind of understand, like, so in terms of what you're creating now, so you're really honoring your calling of teaching and writing, really that deep down your passion. So I'd love to share, like, what's really exciting you in your business now? Like, where are you at with this new vision, this new clarified vision? I'd love to share it with our audience, because I just love your work. So.
Oh, thank you. That's so sweet. I want to say something about taglines and clarified vision. Can I say something about that?
Go for it. Love it.
Okay. So one of the things that really can, as entrepreneurs is, I got to have the right tagline. I got to have the right logo. And it used to hurt me so much. Think of it as, what is when you go to a French restaurant, they give you a little something, a petite bouche. They give you a little taste of something, right? While you're waiting to order. So that's all your tagline is. This is the first logo on my website I've ever had. No, that's not true. We did have a logo back in the Comfort Me days. But anyway, this is the first logo I've ever loved. And I don't know what that tagline means. I don't know what it means. It's just a pointer for me. It's a playground. It's a place to play, and it will change and grow with me. So don't get too hung up on that. So that's my entrepreneurial thing. So that's really what it's lighting up about my work right now. What's lighting me up is this intersection. I don't know how well I can speak about it, but it's between the meditation work that I'm learning and developing, which is really resting and being, and then how that intersects with creative work as a way to both express our voice as women, but also reclaim what has been lost.
That sounds very exciting. I love it.
Yeah, but it's a little esoteric, isn't it? I really wish I was selling tongue oil. So I can tell you that just today you can order a double order of tongue oil for 50% off. Instead of like what? Resting and being, creative, So, and that has different forms it takes. It's taking a retreat form.
Those are the forms that we talk about.
And then I have this wonderful community online that I'll open again in the fall. It's called The Oasis, and we meet once a week, and we do all kinds of meditation together, and then we do journaling about our week and kind of setting our intentions and what we want to be attentive to, and looking at self-care and looking at these different patterns as a way to keep tracking them. So that's one project I'm in, and then I'm also currently teaching a program, an online program I do called Teach Now for people who want to teach. So I'm really got my elbows in there with those gals and guys right now.
That's incredible.
I don't know whether Teach Now will continue. It's had an incredible life, but it's one of those questions, like, is there room for that? What would that look like if I gave it up? Because it's a nice chunk of income. So anyway, I feel like I'm this kind of like this right now about my business.
But I love that. I feel like that too. I'm like, there's so much juiciness. It's so exciting.
It's terrifying. And I'm like, I wrote on we have forums for our mastermind group. And I wrote yesterday, I'm like, what am I doing? What was so exciting to me? I feel completely blah.
Yeah. It's, and I'd love to, I want to bring this up, Jen, because it's a learning that I've just actually experienced from you, and we chatted about it a little bit offline, is that, and you've worked on many programs and obviously experienced this whole feeling, but I've just come off the back of a global summit. It was my first project that I did with the Empowered Women Revolution, and it was incredibly successful in that it was my first program. I had some amazing speakers and guests on there that just, filled my heart and just shared so much wisdom. There was great attendance, and I managed to finance a couple of girls' education for a year in Sierra Leone with an organization that's really close to my heart. And yet I came off the back of that and I was like, oh my goodness, I just feel empty inside. It's just this real downer. I couldn't get motivated again. I was feeling really depressed. It was like I was just in such a bad, dark space. And I touched on it last offline, and you'd written this amazing article that I'd love to share the link of back to you as well, around this whole idea of a vulnerability hangover, and how to really care for yourself in those moments. And I'd love to kind of touch on that a little bit more, Jen, for anyone that's going through big launches and has expectations and then has that feeling, if they come off the back of that project, that it's been a letdown or whatever. What's your experience, and can you share some wisdom around that?
Well, I opened the post, but then I closed it because the connection wasn't good. So I can't remember what I wrote. Vulnerability hangover, however, is a Brene Brown, and she talked about it after her first or second TED Talk. And Brene and I are friendly and met before she got really famous, and so I just want to presence that I learned that term from her. And the basic idea is without you even knowing it, when you've done a big presentation or a big launch, you've really been vulnerable just by the act of saying, come here, look at this, buy this, sign up for this, even if it's free. Yeah. There's a way that, especially as an introvert, I just feel like I am not naked, but more drained, drained. And so I think the basic thing is to really recognize that there's nothing wrong with wanting to take a week off afterwards, or to do the minimum, to watch 10 episodes of Downton Abbey, to hang out with friends, to go get a massage, to go to a hot yoga class. To do some extra things to nurture yourself, and just to keep welcoming and giving yourself time to be with the parts of you that are freaked out that you just did this. Because we all contain all these different parts of ourselves, right? Exactly. And they get these parts of ourselves need time and attention to kind of catch up. There's a famous story. I can't remember the name of the explorer. It was in the 20th century. And let's say he was in Australia, but I think he was actually Africa. And he was pushing his native porters, to go really faster than they wanted to day after day, because he had an agenda to get to this place before anybody else. And on the fifth or sixth day of him pushing his porters, they wouldn't go. And it's the morning, he's like, come on, let's go. What do you wait? We're not going. What do you mean you're not going? We have this agenda. We have to get to this place before everybody else does. And they said, oh no, we have to wait. We've gone so fast. We have to wait. We need time for our souls to catch up with our bodies.
Oh, interesting.
And I think a vulnerability hangover is like that, right? It's like, I need a chance for the other parts of me to catch up and go, it's okay that I was so public with my desire. Because that's really what's happening when you put on a project, right? You're saying, I care about this. I care about these subjects. I have a voice. I care that I'm brave enough for you to see me caring about this. Exactly. And then there's the cultural pieces for those. I mean, Australia has the whole tall poppy thing, right?
Exactly, right. Yes.
Right. So, and other cultures have other things like, don't brag. If you come from the East Coast, like if you come from Massachusetts or someplace like that, the real still a Puritan, like don't stick out, don't be special. So we have cultural things, we have family things, all of that can get stirred up. And then we have the expectations of whatever we set as the benchmark of what was going to be successful. I'm like, oh, I didn't make it. I bet so-and-so always makes their benchmark. I did a big, complicated video thing a year or two ago for charity. I hardly raised any money. The expenses turned out to be higher. But I was, super bummed and hungover after that.
Yeah.
So I think we had 10,000 people show up. It still wasn't enough.
Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah. I love that advice, Jen. I think that whole idea of comparison and expectations and waiting for your soul to catch up. All great, juicy advice. Thank you so much, Jen, it's been incredible.
Schedule some downtime.
And some downtime, exactly. And that's, and that's where I'd love to, we're coming towards the end of the interview, and I'd love for you to just share one piece of advice around as mums, as wives, as women in business, we are juggling so many roles, and it's just crazy busy, our lives. And I'd just love to kind of wrap up, Jen, before we dive into our lightning round, is really what's kind of your one big takeaway for women around self-care?
One of the most powerful self-care practices I know of is set aside a very specific period of time. It needs to be a couple of hours to really feel good, an hour at the least. A half a day is so delicious, but it can be a little scary. So I'd start with 2 hours and be very clear about the beginning and the end. And then for that period of time, your self-care is to continually ask, what do I want? And then start doing it. Is this what I want? Oh, I don't want to do it anymore. And so you'll leave things. You may take a nap the whole time, but you begin to follow desire. I call these desire retreats. And part of what many things that drain us is always being in that slight state of hyper arousal where we're like, okay, I've got to do this and I've got to manage that. And then what about that?
Exactly.
And I wonder how Timmy's doing in school. And oh my God, what if the registrations aren't good? And that is so draining for our nervous system. So to give ourselves this little, like, okay, 2 hours, nothing else, it doesn't matter. You might work on your business. And then you might be in the middle of working on your business and I don't want to do this anymore. I really want to go make a cake.
Oh my goodness, that's just given me permission to have my 2 hours off. I love it. It's fantastic. It's awesome.
We did this group at the Oasis, and it's really fun. It's really fun to have other people doing it with you because you feel less alone.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic, Jen. So I dive into the lightning round, and there's just 2 questions that I end up with. And I'd love to ask you, what is your favorite business or life quote and why?
Oh, well, I love the poem that inspired the tagline on my website. And it's a Rilke poem. And I can't recite the whole thing by heart, but I can recite one stanza or part of a stanza. May what I do flow from me like a river. No forcing and no holding back, just like it is with children. That to me is that place that we want to live, right? It's a flow. We're life is living us instead of our agendas and our expectations and our stories.
Exactly. Oh, that's just gorgeous, Jen. I love it. And my last one is there are so many amazing women out there doing amazing, phenomenal work, but and I know it's hard to kind of single out one, but which woman inspires you the most and why?
Oh gosh. I'm very inspired by Eve Ensler's work in the Congo. Eve Ensler, of course, is the playwright who is most known for the vagina monologues. And she has helped found a camp for women survivors of the unimaginable, horrific abuse isn't even strong enough word that is happening now in the Congo and has been happening for the last 15 years. So she really inspires me. I don't know that I think being friends with her would probably be super intense, but I'm really inspired by the fact that this is such a forgotten part of the world. We just, and it goes on partly because of us, because of conflict memories, because the kind of minerals we're using to have this conversation on these computers. So I feel very complicit in it. And I feel very amazed by what she does.
That's amazing. Well, Africa is very close to my heart too. I'm Zimbabwean born, and I just it's like you said, it's a forgotten part of the world, and really, it's up to us to really get behind them and really make a difference. And women like that are just incredible. So I love that. So thank you for sharing.
You're welcome.
Jen, it's been an absolute pleasure. As I say, I love your work, and I'd just love to for you to share where's the best place that we can find you online.
Jennifer Louden, LOUDEN, like Louden. And I'm Facebook. I have a pro page. My friend page is filled up you can follow me on either one. And then I'm also on Twitter and Instagram. So you can find me on those places. Yeah.
Well, I'll definitely share all those links on the show notes, Jen. Honestly, it's truly been an absolute pleasure speaking to you. Thank you so much.
Well, I hope it was useful, everybody, that you can take one takeaway to build a business that really fits you. And I think the most important thing I could leave you with is nobody knows what to do. You're just as smart as anybody else. And what you're doing, be persistent with it, be kind to yourself, and it'll be great.
That's great advice, Jen, and so many takeaways. It was just wonderful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.
And that wraps up another episode of the Empowered Women Show. Thank you so much for watching and listening. And if you have a chance and you enjoyed this episode, it would really mean the world to me if you would head on over to iTunes and leave me an honest rating and review of the show. That way you'll help boost rankings and really shine the spotlight on these amazing women guests. You'll find the link in the show notes over at www.empoweredwomenrevolution.com. Thank you so much, and see you next time.